Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez today, and today I'm going to do a little rambling. Mostly, I know that I've been doing the Bubishi and I still have to do the leg, but I want to take a little break. I'm probably going to do two videos today anyways. I'm sorry, not today, this week. And I will do the leg eventually, but I wanted to talk about names. The reason is I've come across a lot of websites, Facebook pages, where people will debate what the names of katas really mean. And some people, I've actually read one person say that we can never know what the kata really means. And I like to take a step back. And I will tell you that in karate, there are a lot of ideas that go around. A lot of things weren't necessarily told to us directly, but there were things that were mentioned. Now, my specialty is not history. I love reading history. I love figuring out what's going on, and I think it puts everything in a perspective, in a box, where it came from and why. But my specialty is the human body. I've actually taught all the way to the doctoral level. I taught clinical anatomy at one point. And one of the things I notice is that when I'm teaching clinical anatomy is that it's really easy to recreate injuries. What you do is you find an injury, you determine the structure, and then you use the biomechanics to determine how that injury would happen. Now, by knowing the injuries, we can actually know that there are some injuries that are going to end a fight, or even if it's a sport injury, it will end up ending a career. And there are some injuries that some people will walk away from. And for me, I have noticed over time and time again, the oldest written things on karate usually mention iken hiatsu. Now, some people say, no, iken hiatsu is a modern thing. It came because of the idea of the samurai and didn't have to do with Okinawa. But again, my experience is the oldest records of karate that are talking about how to use it mention this idea of iken hiatsu, that one move should end the fight. And so what I do is I tend to take that idea of iken hiatsu and pair what my katas are with injuries that would end a fight. Now, some of these could actually be life-threatening. Some of them can end up being disabling. That's the way I'm looking at it, based on that idea. Now, history also gives us a lot of things, and the names can tell us a lot. For instance, I did a video on Naihanchi, found out that one of my students used to can read Mandarin, his father can read Mandarin, and it talked about trapping or ensnaring the legs. And so I really was looking at it more based on what the kata name was. Now, why Mandarin? The answer is this. If we look at history, and we look at the time periods we know of karate, we see a really interesting overlap. Now, like I say, I do believe you can know the meaning of katas, but you have to use history. And there are a lot of karate books out there. Karate 1.0 is great. Shoshin Nagamini's Tales of Great Okinawan Masters is amazing. I actually have a whole library. And there's also other books which are not karate books. I actually like this one, Vision of Ryukyu. And I like it because the author is not a martial artist, and he's not trying to prove his ideas of martial art are correct. He actually was trying to show history, and especially he talks about a gentleman in here, which was pretty interesting, Sion, and he actually mentions a lot of him, and he talks a lot about how he was influential in moving Okinawa a certain way, and how influential China was to it. Now, besides that, we actually do have to look at when our arts were established. Now, if we look at Goju-Ryu, which I don't do, but I know a lot of people do, was established in 1930 by Miyagi, who was born in 1888, lived to 1953. Now, I'm going to tell you something interesting. If you think about those years, he lived 65 years. And a lot of people, he passed away young. Well, he passed away young for Okinawa. But you have to remember, life expectancy when he was born in the 1900s was only about 45 years. So he outlived the average person by 20 years. Now, yes, his teacher lived a lot longer, but his teacher also did not live through the Battle of Okinawa. Higaono Sensei, who was born in 1853 and lived until 1915, he was one of the big teachers of the Miyagi-sensei, and the reason that he's important is because he ends up being we end up seeing how far back we can trace roughly the roots of Goju-Ryu. We're talking about early 1800s. Now, when we go to Shurin, and I'm going to put Shotokan in the Shurin, you can actually trace the Shurin to pretty much all Shurins to Anko Itosu, which was born in 1901. There are some people who talk about Matsumura, not Matsumura, uh, Matsumura Orthodox, I'm sorry, yeah, karate, which both of them have the same roots, Matsumura and Matsumura, uh, going to 1800s, and both of them have a connection with Sakugawa, which is 1733, which is the oldest we can actually find records of in karate. You know, we start hearing about different people, but 1733 is roughly where everything begins, as far as we can tell, begins. Now, I will include Ryu, which was founded in 1875, and Wichiru, which is 1896. If I'm wrong with these dates, please mention them on the comments too to make sure I get the right numbers. So again, what we have is we have a history of karate reaching back up until 1733. Now, that's actually really important because all these people, if we trace back the roots, their roots of their studies to their karate, at least one of the roots ends up going to China. All these people were people who had gone to China to study, and there was a group of people called the Yukatchu. Yukatchu were the Okinawan scholar-bureaucrats. These are where our karate came from. If you actually excelled, if you were excelled in academia, you became a Yukatchu, and some of these people actually started by the age of training to become a Yukatchu by the age of 5. And if you were a Yukatchu, the ultimate goal was to go to China to study at the Chinese universities, which the official language of academia back then was Mandarin. Well, okay, so how long ago, when were the Yukatchu established? They were technically established with the 36 families, and the 36 families that were supposedly 36 academic families from China that were sent to Okinawa, to the Kumura village to spread Chinese culture, got there before 1392. Now you think about it, 1392, you have the Chinese influence. People started to get taught to become these Yukatchus who would eventually try to go to China. But now, we're talking about 1392, and Sakugawa wasn't born until 1733. So we'll give him a couple of years. We'll say that some years before that. So we're talking about 400 years of Chinese influence, especially with the written language being Mandarin, was going to affect Okinawa. If you don't think we know, we can tell what a kata in Okinawan karate means because, well, the name's not Mandarin. You pretty much have to explain why, if most of these people studied in China, would they choose characters that are in China, that are in Mandarin, which would be read a certain way. Now, for me, that's actually a big clue. These people spoke Mandarin, they could read Mandarin, they could write Mandarin. They chose names that were going to be in Mandarin, which any academic of their time would be able to look at and be like, oh, that's what you named it. I mean, you think about it. The way they named their styles actually usually is read in a couple different ways, meant to show connections with other styles or where they came from. Matsubayashi-ryu, for instance. It actually can be read Shorin because it follows the Shorin lineages, but it's also the two teachers that Shishinagamini wanted to. Shobayashi, Kobayashi, all of them chose names for a specific reason. Goju-Ryu chose a name for a specific region. Even the name karate, it was chosen for a special reason. And it was based on how it sounded and how it was written, too. And so that's one of the big things that actually ends up happening. So what we have is we can trace karate back to the I think it ended up finding the earliest really was 1680s, and those roots were in China. Now, the one thing to also remember is it, Okinawa has a tendency to borrow from any culture that it's involved in, and it mixes the cultures. If you've gone to Okinawa, you know about the Rutan Island, the island that's used to house a gift from the Korean king, which is built in the Korean style. The palace, you can see the Chinese, which you can see here on the cover of Tears and the Rarest Things. You can see it's actually has a lot of Chinese influence. If you look at on one side of it, you have the naked wood that you see in mainland Japan. So you actually have, I think someone was telling me that the claws on the dragons show a lot of Thai influence, and so you can see influences from all these great nations, all these great empires, the Siam Empire, the Korean Empire, Japanese Empire in Okinawan culture. And so while you would have roots in China, you probably do have other things. The problem is we don't have many reliable sources, and the sources we do have are even scarce. So at the end, what I would say is there are some people who have already suggested this. Jesse from Karate Nerd has actually mentioned about the penans, how if it's read in Mandarin, it means, be safe. Uh, you've had a lot of other people talk about what these katas mean in Mandarin. And based on the history, it would seem that putting Mandarin in, understanding what the kata means in Mandarin is really important, because once we know the name and why it's named something, we can end up looking at it at a different way. We can end up looking at it the way it should be looked at. So, for instance, Shinta, meaning according to my student's dad, it meant something like military hand. Kusanku is actually a high-ranking military personnel, and so what you have is you actually have names that actually will mean something. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I should do another video this week on the Bubishi of the leg. I'm hoping to get to. I hope you enjoy this, and please subscribe if you enjoy these, or if you can, write some comments. If you think I'm a complete clown, please, you can even mention that too. I hope you enjoy this, and have a nice day.